Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi, and very excited. It's taken us a little bit, but we finally got him here. He needs no introduction, but we're going to give him one anyway. He was a member of the Derby Red Raider football team from 1986 to 1988, as well as the Derby baseball team from 1986 to 1987 to 1989, I should say. He was an all housy selection in 1989. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Ed Pokey Piccirillo. And Poke, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor. Like I said, I've waited a long time, and I'm really excited. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you. It's an honor. I'm excited too, and love your show. So I'm excited about it.
So Poke, chat me up a little bit. What was it like growing up in Derby? Say like 10, 11 years old. Talk to me about that a little bit.
It was nice. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody looked out for everybody. Sports were big, especially Derby football. So, going to the games and watching everybody play, and, Ansonia Derby game, sometimes there's 5,000-6,000 people back then. And, same thing with the Shelton Thanksgiving Day game. So it was just nice. It was a good time to be a kid, and it was a nice place to grow up.
Right. Poke, the one thing about Derby football, Derby, sports in general is it was always the big thing to do on the weekends, especially for football. Yeah. Baseball, you always had 2 or 3 games during the week. So back then as a kid, you had a lot of stuff to do. So it was a great time to really be a kid, especially in the town of Derby.
Yeah, it was. I mean, like I said, it was exciting. Everybody knew everybody, and there's just it was exciting to play. You wanted to play, you wanted to win, and it just, you had that drive, you had that pride. It was a good time.
Right. So we'll get to baseball soon, but how did Derby football begin for you? How old would you say you started playing when you went out for like Pop Warner and stuff?
I was on the Pee Wee team, so maybe like 7, 8 years old, I think,
right,
somewhere in that area, and then I played ever since. So just had a love for it. I actually almost went to Emmett O'Brien, but I wanted to play, so they didn't have a football team, so I stayed at Derby. So.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but did you have like Barry McDermott as a coach, Nick Rizzio, those guys? Who was your first coaches when you started playing?
I honestly, I don't remember, but I remember Barry. I remember Mr. Rizzio. I'm trying to think who else. There was another guy. I honestly can't remember her name. He was loud. He was hilarious. He was a good guy though. But there was a good bunch of guys that coached. They worked their butts off, and they put in a lot of time for us kids back then.
Right. And we'll get to high school football in a moment, but as tough as the high school coaches were, I think those guys in Pop Warner were very tough, very demanding. But I think that really helped you, your fellow teammates, when you got to high school, because you knew what to expect. You knew that in football, sometimes coaches have to be demanding on their players because there's no margin for error. So having those guys early on in Pop Warner probably really helped you guys once you got to high school.
Oh, it did. Like you said, they were tough on us, and we learned, that we had to perform. We had to make the plays, and it did help. Instead of going up there not knowing what to expect, we had an idea on what was expected of us and how to go about getting it done.
Right. Now, were you a receiver right away when you played Pop Warner, or did that happen in time?
That happened in time. Originally, I was a quarterback.
Oh, okay.
And then eventually they moved me over to wide receiver once I got to high school.
Right. So, Poke, obviously your baseball skills speak for themselves. Where did the love for baseball begin for you? I mean, I'm sure you were a typical kid playing Little League, and, as time went on, you just really loved the game.
Yeah, I mean, I played Pop Warner and I mean, not Pop Warner, I'm sorry, Little League, and I fell in love with the game. Loved it. Loved watching on TV, just everything about it, and it just continued to grow as I got older. And as Mr. D has always said, baseball is my first love, no matter what I tell anybody else.
Right. Which, Pope, back then when you were a kid in high school, that was rare because football was usually the first love for so many kids. But I think of you, I think of Ben Bartone. You guys really enjoyed baseball just a little more than football, which back then, like I said, it was very rare because
Yeah,
football really was the big game in town. So it just goes to show that baseball is a sport that so many kids really love and gravitate towards.
they do. Unfortunately, in Derby, we didn't have the numbers, and football was. I mean, Derby football is Derby football.
Right.
But there were kids that loved the game of baseball, and like myself, and like you said, like Ben, and it was just a fun. To me, it was a fun game. No matter what happened, no matter what the outcome was, I just enjoyed playing it. You know.
Right. One thing I found remarkable, Poke, is the fact that when you were a kid, you didn't have all these feeder programs like they do now. There's
No.
fall baseball. You could do hitting in the winter a lot. Back when you played, I mean, you had Little League, you had Babe Ruth. There was summer ball, I believe, but there wasn't all these other options that you guys had like
Right.
kids do now. So, I mean, it's a credit to so many baseball players that played back then that they went on to excel like they did because basically they only had one season, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, part of it was where we grew up. Everybody knew everybody. I was fortunate. I had like Michelle Jadek, Mike Jadek, Frank and Mike Smetana. We all grew up together. My brother Robbie,
Right.
and every day we either played baseball or football or basketball. And so even without those feeder programs,
Right.
we just played every day, and you know we wanted to get better, and we pushed ourselves and each other. So
Right. So talk to me a little bit about freshman football, Poke, because I know it wasn't a good year for you guys. I think you went 1-8. There was a real bad loss to Ansonia that a lot of guys still bring up to this day. I think it was 68-8, but it was also a turning point for your class because you guys kind of bonded together and said, we don't want this to happen when we're seniors. Talk about freshman football a little bit because if I remember correctly, Rob Raschuti was the quarterback for you guys. I think you had Johnny Oko and Tom D'Onofrio as the coaches. So it wasn't the best start to your high school career, but it definitely was a turning point in your career.
yeah, well, I didn't actually play freshman football that year.
Oh, okay.
I was small. I probably weighed a buck 10, soaking wet.
Yeah.
So the coaches convinced me to play another year at Pop Warner. So my freshman year, I actually played Pop Warner, and then came up and played after that.
Right.
So,
And
but
the
I
thing
know
of,
they took it hard.
yeah.
You could see it in their faces, and I went to the games, and they were not happy about it.
Right. And the one thing that's really good about Pop Warner football, Poke, is it prepared you guys for games and made games fun because practices were very intense. I know in Pop Warner they did a lot of hit, and you can't really do
Yeah,
that as much in high school because you can't afford to get people hurt.
right.
But you guys were so prepared by the time you got to high school by all the stuff you learned in Pop Warner. How important do you think it is to have a program like Pop Warner Football AYF? Because to me, without it, you can't build a successful program.
No, you're right. You can't. I mean, the kids, they need to learn the skills. They need to learn plays. They need to learn how to play that position. Without, I mean, it's great going playing in the street and all that. But without uh, actual structured practice in games, you're not going to learn. And then you come up to the high school level, and you're just, you're behind the eight ball. These
Right.
other teams have been playing forever, and if you don't have that program, then you come up and you know it, it's not good for the team. You're just going to get shellacked every time you go out there.
Right. Now, Poke, I can't remember everything, but did you wrestle a little bit in high school as well?
No, no, my
No.
brother
Okay.
did. My brother was
Right.
the wrestler.
Right. So, talk to me about freshman year of baseball. Did you play some JV as well, or were you strictly on the freshman team that year?
The freshman team, if I remember correctly, I ended up moving up to JV because
Right.
we didn't have the bodies. So myself, Mike Mangillo, and maybe Frank Smetana and Robert Schutte went up to JV, and we played from there. So we didn't have the numbers, so we didn't really. The freshman team kind of disbanded, and they brought us up.
Right. And, I think that was very, what's the word I'm looking for? It was probably beneficial to you guys because
Oh, definitely.
you would have Coach D, I believe, for the JV
Yep.
coach that year. That was his final season as JV coach before he moved up to head coach. So
Correct.
you guys got him for 4 years. And I think that's extremely important when you're playing a sport that you have the same group of coaches throughout your career, especially, in high school, especially because it's very hard to go from one coach to another coach. Sometimes kids go through 3 coaches and it's never a good thing. So having John D right off the bat had to be huge for you guys.
It was. I mean, we knew what to expect from him. He knew what to expect from us. And, it was almost like he became a father figure. He was just, he was there. Not only was he our teacher, he was our coach. And, I mean, him and Riles put in, I can't even imagine how many hours they put in with us. And they were always there, whether it was during the season or even off season. So it was nice to be able to have the same coach for those 4 years. It really was.
Right. And I think the other thing, Poke, that was good for you guys as well is because you played JV that year, you practiced with the varsity a lot. So you got to practice with people like Tom Abel,
Yep.
people like I can't remember if Fossey played that
Cyril's.
year. Cyril's, yeah.
I don't remember if Fossey did, but like Cyril's and those guys.
Right.
Yeah.
So that had to be big for you guys because you could always learn a lot from them as well. They were very good players and good teammates as well, would do anything for Derby sports. So in a lot of ways, your freshman year was a great year for a lot of reasons, but a big reason was you got to learn so much more about the game.
Yeah, it was a nice stepping stone. It was good to see how things were going to work at the high school level versus little league. So it was nice, and yeah, you're right. You did learn a lot from those guys. They like how it was back in the day. There was a little bit of joking around or ball breaking, but bottom line, and at the end of the day, they wanted you to be a better player because they had pride in Derby and the sports.
Right. So let's talk about sophomore year of football, the 1986 season, which was a great season for Derby football. They won the Housy, won
Yep.
10 games, knocked off Seymour and Ansonia, a big win against Cheshire. Talk to me just as a sophomore that year, what it was like for you, because you got to be surrounded by so many great athletes, Jimmy Lewis, Bobby Sobin, Chris King. Just talk about that season a little bit, because that's really a great introduction to varsity football when you're playing with people like that.
I mean, it was fun. You learned a lot. I don't remember much about the season, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But just being around those guys and again, they wanted you to be good, so they didn't take it easy on you. They punished you on the field in practice, and but you got better for it,
Right. And let me ask you, Poke, you had coaches like Charlie DeCenzo, Frank Zuba, Frank Alou, John D. Francisco, of course, Tommy D'Onofrio, John Oko. Talk about the coaches that year. I think you probably worked a lot with Frank Alou, especially. So,
Mr. Alou, yeah.
Right. So just talk about what that was like for you, because you learn a lot about the game when you're playing for such good great coaches like those guys.
You did. I mean, as a kid, you get cocky and you think you know everything, but I mean, those guys know the game. They know it inside out, and anytime they saw something, they wouldn't just belittle you and, hey, you got to do this. They'd pull you to the side and they'd work with you and tell you what's the reasoning, and just so you get in your head and you understand it. It wasn't just like do this, do this, do this. They broke it down for you, so you could understand it and become a better player.
Right. Poke, let me ask you this. Sophomore year of baseball, John D. Francisco gets the head coaching job. One big thing I thought that was important, and it set the tone for years to come, is he brought in good coaches. One of them, of course, you brought him up a few minutes ago, and that was, of course, Steve Riley, known to everybody as Riles. Just talk about that season and talk about having those guys on the staff, because I know they have a very special place in your heart. So just talk about that a little bit.
Like I said, they were always there, no matter what happened. Um, you know, when Riles came on, like D's D. You know,
Yeah.
he's a fireball, and he gets very excited. And Riles was the calmer one. You know, so I always said if D couldn't get you excited about something, no one could. But Riles was the one that could teach you or taught you how to use that intensity and
Right.
and play with it. Um, it was nice. You know, we had some very good athletes. We actually made the states that year. You know, we had
Right.
Sogan, oh my God, Ennis, you know, and Saku. There's some
Yeah.
really good players besides like, you know, the juniors like Tony Pick and rest his soul Albie and
Right.
and those guys. So it was it was a good year. It was a lot of fun. You know, we won some games, and you know, we thought we could have went farther. But unfortunately, you know, we lost Ansonia. So
Right. Now, were you a shortstop right away, Poke, or
I moved.
did you play all over the place?
It depended on who was pitching.
Right.
I either played third or short. If Saki was pitching, I played third because I believe Saki was played third, and if Pet was pitching, I played short. So
Right.
went back and forth depending on who was on the mound.
Right. I'm sure when you were a kid at the time, Poke, you didn't realize the magnitude of it, but to be playing as a sophomore with great athletes like that and to be able to be on the field and playing varsity as a sophomore, you have to look back at it and kind of be proud that you were able to get on the field so young because you played with so many great athletes that it's really a testament of how good of a player you were because you were one of the main guys out there.
Thank you. It was. I mean, at the time, you're right. You don't see it that way. You know, I just wanted to go out there and play. You know, I love the game, and that's what it was for me. But um, I would have did anything I could or had to do to get out on that field, and for D to and Riles to have the the confidence in my ability to help the team win or stay in the game was a big boost for me there also.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about senior year, your football season, 1988. The 87 team came off a great year. They went 9-1, won the Housy, had that big game against Shelton where they beat them 33-8. That was the Greg Patnella
Yep.
game.
Yep.
So it was a great year that year. That was a great team. And you guys went into that season in 88 with not a lot of I'm sure you guys had
Yeah.
expectations, but there weren't a lot of
No,
expectations
not at all.
by the
No.
experts. They were saying if you went 5-5, it was a great season. And although you guys, I wouldn't say pounded teams, you guys grinded it out and knew
Yeah.
how to win. So just talk about the 88 season a little bit because a lot of times that gets overlooked, but that was a very good season, an 8-2 season. And that's a credit to the hard work of the seniors on that team.
Yeah. I mean, I know I'm proud of how we played. I think anybody else on the team is proud. You know, there's two games that obviously we had letdowns for ourselves, but um, we, like you said, nobody expected us to do much. Nobody thought we had any real talent or ability in our class as far as sports was concerned. So they thought, you know, we were just going to roll over. But again, you know, you're from Derby. Um, Football was life, and
Yeah.
we weren't going to let anybody tell us how our season was going to go or how it should end. So we just went out there. We worked hard every day, and for the most part, it paid off for us.
Right. And of course, you had the big game against Brantford that year, had a big touchdown that kind of sealed that victory. But talk to me a little bit, Poke, about the Ansonia game because you had never probably experienced a varsity win against them where you're on the
No,
field the entire game. I know for so many it was a great feeling. And what I really liked about that game is everybody that played that day contributed. John Sherwin with the
yep,
big touchdown. Greta Doria had a great game. Mark Angeletti, Chris Anderson was player of the game, yourself.
yep,
And then, of course, one guy that I'm very partial to because I've known him for a few years now is Ray Silvernail. And his
great punter.
punt, I
Yep,
mean, a lot of people, that gets unnoticed a lot,
yep,
but that punt was tremendous. Fran Hendricks bobbled it, and
yep.
that set up the winning field goal. So just talk about that game and what it was like playing in that game that year.
Well, I mean, when you play against Ansonia, you can't help but get excited, and that's it's almost like like the Super Bowl, you know.
Yeah.
But nobody, I don't think anybody gave us a chance that game either, even though we were undefeated at that time. Um, and then going in and holding them, being up, keeping it 7-7. Um, and the guys on the team just gave it all they got. And then, fortunately, we had one, we blew a punt coverage,
Right.
but luckily it got called back. We got lucky on that one. And then we were able to, like you said, Ray, nice boot. We were able to jar her loose, and then we were able to recover. And then Bizzato was able to push it through for us. So it was a nice victory. I know a lot of guys, including myself, were a little teary eyed.
Yeah.
It was a nice day. It was a good day.
Right. And I think it said a lot because that Ansonia team was very good. They won
They
the
were
state
very good.
title that year.
Yeah.
Dave
Yeah.
D'Onofrio and Fran Hendricks were as good as any football players in the state of
Yeah.
Connecticut. Then of course you had Stallings, Diudo, all those
Yeah.
guys. So I mean, you guys beat a great team in my opinion, and
Yeah.
obviously that was the highlight of the season. But to go 8-2, you look back on it 30 years now, you have to be proud of what you guys accomplished.
I know I am, and I believe the other guys are. I know some of the guys that I keep in touch with regularly are. Like I said, nobody expected us to do anything, and we were able to put together a nice season. Like I said, we had a couple letdowns. Shelton and Seymour, but all in all, it was a great season. I'm the only thing I'm a little bitter about is now they got the 4 teams in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So back then,
Oh yeah, you guys would have got
with
it.
that chance, and who knows, maybe we would have got that state championship.
Right. So let's talk about the 1988 baseball season. It's your junior year. The team has a great year. They make the tournament. I believe they lose to Ansonia, but talk about that team.
Yeah.
I always think of Greg Pettinella because he was so good that year pitching. People forget how good he was. I think he was 8-2, maybe 7-2. Tremendous year. And then I always think of a guy like Rob Altamari winning that big game against East Haven because you guys really needed that win. And again, it was people contributing from every part of the dugout. So just talk about that 88 season because it was a very good year for you guys.
No, we strung together, some wins. We didn't have, I mean, we were never a powerhouse team, but we had guys like you said that, when the time came, they step up. Pat, had a great season. He pitched well all year. He hit well. Albie was phenomenal behind the plate. Tony Pick at first. Just all around, the guys pulled their weight, and when it came down to it, we pulled off some big wins. We beat Griswold in the States, and when we went against Ansonia, we thought we had a shot, and we just came up a little bit short.
Right, and you guys also were without Aaron Sill for part of that season, so he would have been an important part of that team, and I think you guys would have even had a better record had he not been hurt. So to still make the tournament while he was out for several games really is a tribute to the type of work that you guys put in. One guy that you mentioned briefly before, I wanted to bring him up, is Jimmy Albert, because nobody loved the game quite like Jimmy Albert did when it came to baseball. I know there's a story that they canceled the game because they couldn't get a bus, and he was so mad about it that he walked all the way home. He lived on the east side of Derby, but that's how passionate he was about baseball.
Jimmy was.
Just talk about Jimmy and talk about the type of leader he was for you guys.
Jimmy, he was a great friend. He kind of took me under his wing. He was always, again, everybody liked to break stones in Derby, and if you didn't tease somebody a little bit, it kind of was like you didn't like him. So of course, he would bust my chops just like everybody else. But at the end of the day, he'd be one of the first guys there to come over to you and pick you up if you made a mistake or if something happened, and if you needed a ride home, because depending on your age, you couldn't drive.
Right.
So he was always there. He wanted to win. He had such a passion for the game of baseball and football and just derby sports in general. He was a great friend, and he is missed and will always be missed.
Right. And you had a good season that year, Poke, and it was a great way to go into the following season coming off that season. Let me ask you, what are some of the things that you would do off the field, like on your own, to kind of better your game? I mean, did you go to the batting cage a lot? Did you and your brother kind of always play at Bradley School, stuff like that? What did you do to kind of always keep yourself fresh?
Uh, Mostly it was like playing a lot of wiffle ball with
Yeah.
like Shep, my brother. Um, a lot of times, Riles would stay. At practice would end, and I'd stay for another hour and a half, and Riles would just hit ground balls at me. And then the other guys, and again, Mike would stay, Mangello or my brother and Pat McMahon and those guys, and just they had a lot to do with it because, if not for that, there was nothing else to do except maybe play wiffle ball. But Riles was always there, whenever we wanted to stay and take ground balls or anything like that. He was, he put in countless hours after practice doing that for us.
Yeah, and the other thing about Riles, about 18 years after you were out of high school at this point, he came out with a book called The Fat
Yeah.
Lady Never Sings. It was about the 1992 Derby baseball team. But what I really loved about the book, too, is that he never forgot about the kids who kind of started the tradition of winning in Derby baseball or brought it back. And you're mentioned a lot in that book in the beginning, like the first few chapters he brings you up a lot. It had to make you feel good as a former player to know that he thought that highly of you, that he never forgot about the first couple of teams that he coached and the players that were on it, because I mean, he had you in that book quite a bit. And that's how I learned about who Pokey Piccirillo was. So, I mean, that's a great job by Steve.
Oh, definitely. I was surprised and honored that, that he, thought of me, whether it was that much or whatever, but it was nice to be in the book, and I'm honored that he thought of me enough to put me in there that much.
Right. So, Poke, talk to me a little bit about the 1989 season. You guys come in after making the tournament. Again, it was an up and down season, and I know there was the D had wore Lou's hat or something like that, and you guys had won maybe five or six in a row. So it was kind of a very, I don't want to say inconsistent season, but kind of.
It was,
yeah,
but it was, yeah.
Right. But talk about that team, because it was a big year for you on a personal level. You make all housy, and I believe you made all Valley, all Hartford Current. It had to be a great feeling for you, because I know, like anything else, you didn't always have the confidence in yourself. And once you got that confidence, your career really took off at Derby. But had to be a tremendous feeling on a personal level to be told you made all housy, because so many great teams in the housy. That's not an easy thing to do.
No, it was. I mean, to this day, it's still an honor. I worked hard. Riles and the guys on team helped me work hard. They, they were always there. They pushed and we had a good team. We had a lot of good players. Benny came up and played. We had the Marcuccios, Pat McMahon, Frank Smetana,
Right.
Robert Chudy, Mike Mangello, who was all Valley. We had a lot of good players, and my brother Robbie played second base. It just seemed like, and we won a couple of big games. I mean, we beat Cheshire.
Yeah.
Mike came up big at the end and brought home the winning run. But just some games that we should have won, we didn't finish, and and then it ending the way it did with a couple games short. It just a couple games we should have won. It made it tough. Those awards at the end of the year, yeah, made it a little bit better, but it would have been nice to get back to the States, and who knows what's going to happen from there. So.
Right. And Poke, the other thing about John D and Steve Riley too is they were great teachers, great coaches, but they
Yep.
were also two of your biggest fans because they always encouraged you to keep playing the game, have confidence in yourself, and they really preached to you about staying in school, which you listened to them and you took their advice. And I think it has a lot. What they taught you and the advice they gave you is a big reason why you're so successful in your everyday life today.
They were a big part of my high school career on and off the field. I valued their opinion and anything they had to say. So, whenever they came up to me and told me that I was doing something right or doing something wrong, I took it to heart because they were I knew they were looking out for my best interest. They weren't just trying to whitewash things to make themselves or me happy. They were telling me uh, what I needed to hear because I was either screwing up or something like that. So they were a big part of my high school life.
I think what was really cool about Derby back then too, Poke, and I'm sure it's the same today, but back then as well, is teachers, coaches from other sports, they always helped each other out whenever the teams needed it, whenever fellow teachers or fellow coaches needed it. And I remember there was a big issue about the prom was the night before a
Yeah,
big tournament or a big game, and they were worried about you guys weren't going to be able to play the game. And I know Derby coaches from football stepped up, gave people rides to make sure they could be at the game. But talk to me a little bit about how stressful that could be too, because here you are, you're going to your senior prom, and then you got to play a game the next day. I mean, back then, I'm sure you guys were kids. You probably didn't. You were like, yeah, we could do it, no big deal. But it had to be stressful at
yeah,
times.
it was, and I think the year before we had the states, and the same thing happened before the Ansonia game to those seniors. But yeah, we needed a couple wins to get in, and we had our senior prom, and it's supposed to be a fun time. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it was, but a lot of the guys were more worried about what was going to happen the next day. And
Right.
I know they did everything they could to try to move the game. Whether it was, I don't know why it didn't get moved, but we showed up and we played hard and we just didn't get it done. But
Right.
it was stressful. It wasn't, I don't know. It wasn't an ideal situation.
Right. And there's always going to be highs and lows in sports. That's how it works. Sometimes you're going to be up, sometimes you're going to be down. I know for you, Poke, losing that game and falling short of the tournament, it hit you hard. If I
Yeah.
remember correctly, talking to Riles, you sat in that locker room forever. You did not want to go home. You just were so distraught. But that just shows the passion and the love you had for Derby baseball. Talk to me about that game a little bit, but also talk to me about what Derby baseball meant to you on a personal level.
I mean, that game, we, like I said, we thought we had it, and I think I actually made the last out. I think if I remember right, we had runners on, and a chance to go ahead, and I, I I hit the ball to right center, and I thought I beat the kid, and he caught it at the fence. So that was on me. But baseball, like I said before, baseball was everything for me. I love the game, always have. Uh, I just wanted to play. I was just a kid from Derby who loved the game of baseball. Um, the teammates I had were amazing. Coaches I had were amazing, and I enjoyed my years playing at Derby and playing ball with those guys.
Right. Years later, Poke, you gave back to Derby, obviously, you gave back to your coaches. And a special moment happened a few years back, I believe 2018. Coach D was
Yeah.
honored by the Diamond Club and he was selected to their Hall of Fame. And I know it meant a lot to him. I remember him talking about it at Dunkin' Donuts that weekend when he saw you at his induction ceremony. It really choked him up. Just talk to me about that because I know that was, you were just as proud of him getting in as he was proud of being honored.
Yeah, I was. D is, like I said, he is and always been a good friend. He was, like I said, like a father figure. He was always there if I needed someone to talk to or anything like that. And you know, just for him to be honored in that way, just laminated what kind of coach he was, how good he was, and how he was loved by the players and even the other coaches. You know, they obviously other people saw it, or else he wouldn't have got in. So it was nice, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world if I couldn't. So
Right. You've had several teammates throughout your career. Some of them have been your best friends and stuff like that. But what's really cool for some people is they get to play with their siblings. And you were fortunate, again, to play with your sibling, Willow. And talk about playing with your brother, because that had to be fun, because I believe he played second base, you played shortstop.
Yeah.
So you're playing side by side each other. I think I like Cal and Billy Ripken and stuff like that. So talk about being able to play with your brother, because that had to be a big highlight of your career.
It was. That was one of the things that I enjoyed about that year. You know, my brother and I always didn't get along, and not always, but we had our moments. We're brothers. But on the field, he wanted to win just as much as I did. And if there's a ground ball up the middle, we weren't afraid to try to knock each other out of the way to get it, to make the out. That's all that mattered. So if we had to go through if I had to go through him or he had to go through me, that's the way it was. But it was nice to see him get a shot to play. He did well. I was honored, and it was a privilege to play with him. Like you said, a lot of guys don't get that opportunity. So to have that chance and to actually get to play with him, it was nice.
Right. And Poke, who were some of the teammates that you really enjoyed playing with? Not just so much because of their talent, but because you knew they worked hard, they were dedicated, and you just knew you could always count on them whenever times were tough.
Well, I mean, there was always like Albie and Endo and even Sobin and those guys, But my senior year, it was like Brian and Scott Marcuscio, Paul Allen, my brother, obviously, Frank. I grew up with Frank Smetana, and he's like a brother to me, and Mike Mangello, the co-captain. He was my best friend in high school. Then you had like Pat McMahon, who I grew up with. I mean, just pretty much everybody on the team. Benny Martone.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to miss people, and it's going to, but everybody on that team it was almost like a family. It was nice. It was a good time. Everybody, even after the games or on the weekends, somehow we all managed to hook up somewhere and hang out a little bit. So it was a nice year. It was a good season, and it was a great bunch of guys and teammates.
Right. And in 2022, Ed Piccirillo is doing great things, and he's still involved of the sport of baseball, but now you're involved with softball, and I believe you've been coaching at Shelton High the past couple of years. So talk about that a little bit. And you've also coached Shelton youth sports as well, your daughters, stuff like that. So just talk about that experience as well.
Well, I helped out with like my daughter and my son. I never thought I'd coach, because I had coaches like D who were a little over the top sometime, and I didn't know if I'd be like that. And you can't really be like that today. So I'd help out with that, and it was a good learning experience. Watching my son and daughter learn the game a little bit. They still have a long way to go, but they're getting it. And then Lindsay Wheeler, who's a friend of the family, asked me if I was interested in coaching. And again, I wasn't sure, because number one, it's Shelton. And number two, it was girls softball, and I didn't know how that would go. So, but they're a great bunch of girls. It's a lot of fun. They make it fun. They're just a great bunch of kids and very good athletes. They're very talented. There's a lot of great players on there, and we had a good season. I think we started out rocky, maybe 1-4. But then they put it together, and we finished strong, and ended up in both tournaments, and won a couple games. But then things happen, and sometimes the ball doesn't bounce your way. But it was nice, and I'm excited about this year with the girls. We have pretty much 9 seniors back, so looking forward to the season and see if we can win a couple more games.
It's ironic too that you're coaching with Lindsay, and the reason I say this is because two of your biggest fans are her two daughters, Avery and Hadley, who absolutely just think the world of you, and
They're good kids.
they love anytime you get brought up, they can tell stories about you, and they just love talking about you. So I mean, it has to be cool when you can coach with a friend and you work well together and stuff like that, and you're having success. I mean, it just makes it that much better.
It does. Like I said, it makes it fun, because sometimes how working with someone you're friends with sometimes can be rough,
Right.
especially if things go bad. If you're not winning or anything like that. But I think we complement each other well, and it doesn't hurt that we're winning right now. So, but it is fun, and Lindsay's kids are great. I love them, and they're good kids. So that makes it a little easier too.
Right. Ed, before we go, let me ask you this. What has been the most rewarding thing that you got out of being a Derby athlete? If you had to pick one thing, what would you say it was?
One thing. I don't know. Just almost like camaraderie, just being a part of it. You can go someplace, and if there's another Derby guy there, you might not know him from, he could be 10 years older, 10 years younger, but you got something to talk about. It's just something that can bring you together, being a part of it, being a part of that, that whole era in the Derby football program and the baseball program. It's just, it was a lot of fun, and it was a highlight for me as far as my growing up.
Right. Well, Poke, I congratulate you on a great career. Number one, I mean, from the time I've gotten to know Steve Riley, you're one of the first names he always brings up when he talks about people he's coached, and he's coached for 35 years. So that really says a lot about what you were as a player, and he loves you as a person. And just watching the stuff you've been doing with the Shelton's girls, youth sports, your kids, stuff like that, I could tell that you're a great person as well. And I really do applaud you for the work you do. And thank you for coming on today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Folks, I've been a big Derby sports fan since probably about 1984. I've saw so many great games, so many great football games, basketball games, baseball games, softball games, you name it. And you get to see these great athletes over the years. And then, of course, there's these athletes who sometimes fall under the radar, and then they just come out and surprise you and do so many wonderful things. And Ed Pokey Piccirillo is one of those people. He was a very underrated football player and a phenomenal baseball player. He's a big reason why Derby football went 8-2 in 1988, and he's a big reason why Derby baseball made the tournament 2 out of the 3 years that he was there. He's a tremendous player who gives it his all each and every day. You heard him talk about his teammates and how much they've meant to him, and you never once during this interview heard him talk about himself. It was always about his teammates and his coaches. He appreciates the game, he appreciates the people he played with, and he appreciates the coaches that he had. That's really what a complete athlete is all about, and you won't find any better than Ed Pokey Piccirillo. For In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.